I want to start with an open on the quarterback depth in the AFC and kind of play it out here because I don't know that I have it down definitively because I think a lot like how Bill and I on a Sunday pod had talked about our top 20, top 5 players, which I think most people got. For some, they just were obsessed with the idea that we didn't know what we were doing. And that was the whole point, is that there's all these players' names that get thrown around all the time. And depending on which way the wind is blowing that week, especially in the NFL, the idea of like a top 5 quarterback, there's probably 10 to 12 guys that you'll hear throughout a season mentioned as a top 5 quarterback. And it's just not true. There's if anything, maybe you should just say, hey, this is what we think the top tier is, and this is how many guys there are. Because I actually think in the NBA, it might be 1 through 6, 7, and 8, but it actually only might be like 1, 2, and 3, which is really a moving target depending on however you identify or define these things yourself. So whenever I think about the NBA, it was kind of funny because Bill and I were going back and forth with it. And I'm like, every 6 months, I think I should come up with something towards the end of a regular season and then revisit that, compare it to the playoffs. Because after the playoffs, you feel stupid ever suggesting somebody that's won isn't higher than somebody who's lost. But then you go back to the next regular season and you're kind of like, all right, you know what? I have a little bit, or I'm less emotionally influenced because of recent events. So with the AFC just loading up, whether it's grabbing Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson staying in the conference, but now playing at some point for Cleveland, Matt Ryan coming over from Atlanta to the Colts. So there's been a bit of a transition, but I don't know. I don't know if it's as egregious as it's been made out to be, but I think the selling of the argument, and again, we're going to check with Sheil Kapadia on this because he's really good on all the quarterback stuff from The Athletic. We've had him on a bunch of different times. But if you go top 5 guys that are at least in the conversation for top 5 guys, I think Mahomes, look, anybody at this point that's saying Mahomes is outside of top 5, I'm not sure you should be listening to him. People want to knock him a little bit because of this past year or losing the playoffs at home to Cincinnati. You can go ahead and do it. I'm probably not going to. Mahomes, I think Allen is right there. Because Burrow goes on this run, it feels like you can't leave Burrow out. We'll just put him down. And then Herbert, he had moments of being like everybody's favorite. Well, everybody's expressive. A lot of people seem to be on that Herbert train there for a little while, but I'm not even saying that he should be outside of it. Lamar has had an incredible run. He's got an MVP. But it now feels like consensus is that Lamar is just not allowed to be in front of like another 6 or 7 guys, which I think I'm okay with. But then you throw in Russell Wilson, who comes over, but he's not top 5 at this point. We still haven't mentioned Rodgers. So what I think is happening here in the AFC is that you have a group of potential top 5ers, right? That's really what it is. Not that this is 1, 2, 4, and 5 in the NFL and it's definitive. We're all sure of it. It's that the AFC has more potential top 5ers than the NFC does because the NFC has Rodgers. It has Brady. And, Kyler's had some nice stretches, but he's fallen apart the last 2 years physically, and his last playoff game was atrocious, so we can't do that. Stafford just won a Super Bowl, but nobody's going to put him in the top 5. And then the rest of the options are after Dak has like a 2 or 3 week stretch of averaging 380 yards and putting up huge points. Their home road splits last year were crazy, but Dak's going to have some stretch, I imagine, at some point that he's going to put up huge numbers, and somebody on TV is going to say he's a top 5 guy. He's not. There's no room. There's just no room for him here. So it's Rodgers, it's Brady, it's not Cousins. Fields is TBD. I think the NFC also has more meh quarterbacks. Where you go, Wentz, Mac Jones is in the AFC. That's Daniel Jones, looking at my notes here. I think we all know how that one's going to end. Fields, too early. Goff, meh. Winston, meh. Atlanta, TBD. Carolina, good luck. Jimmy, yeah, meh. Drew Lock, you getting excited yet, folks, in Seattle? Probably not. Where, if you take it back to the AFC, you go, okay, Josh Allen, awesome. Tua, Wilson, Mac, not all in the same category, but you get the point. They're not in there. I think people like Mitch Trubisky's stats and have forgotten that he just wasn't very good. Tannehill's put up crazy numbers. I mean, some of the stuff that would be like top 5 numbers, we know that's aggressive, and that's not the case. David Millis, who's probably a guy I would say 50% of our audience forgets his name every now and then. And then you've got Carr and Wilson around at the rest of the AFC West. So really, if I were to break this down, it's maybe 7 AFC of the top 10, maybe six or 7, knowing that some of these names are going to be disappointing and some of these names are going to exceed our expectations. And ultimately, yeah, I mean, I think that's what it is. I think the AFC has a higher crop of guys at the very top that are in that argument for that first tier, however big that number is. Top 5 is the one we always assign to it, but it doesn't always make all that much sense because sometimes you have less and sometimes you have more. And that's where I think you're seeing this shift on top of the NFC having a lot of quarterbacks where it just doesn't really move the needle all that much. So, yeah, the AFC depth is better. And the other part of this, too, that happens a lot, and I'm not being completely dismissive of it, but it happens where it's like, well, if you're in the AFC, you need a quarterback. Hey, man, you kind of need one no matter which conference you're in. Like, do you think NFC teams now, because if you believe that, if you believe the motivation is, and sometimes it is the case if you're in a division and you've got to keep up with other people, but it also seems to mean like the opposite could be possibly true, that there's an NFC team going, we probably do. Could we get a quarterback? Yeah, we could get one. Like Tuesday, they're sitting around the front office going, hey, should we get one? I'm like, dude, did you see the lack of depth around the top 5? Did you hear Russillo's open the other day? We don't need to get one. Yeah, you're right. We don't need a quarterback. We're not in the AFC. I don't know. I think we say that too much. I think it happens. Yes, I think in the past, whether you want to talk SEC West football in the arms race, or I remember back in the day, the Red Sox trying to keep pace with the Yankees in the AL East because you're kind of looking at the division that you're in. Maybe the Padres are motivated to do what they've been doing the last couple of years because they're dealing with the Dodgers, who never seem to care about how much they're spending. Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. But I don't think it's so excessive to now suggest that all these AFC teams are trying to figure out how to get a quarterback because the depth is so much better in the conference, which it is. But does that mean that you believe that some teams were like indifferent about improving the position prior to this? Right? You think the Colts were going, hey, should we get one? Should we get a quarterback? They're like, I don't know. Like, oh, Russell Wilson's on Denver. Yeah. Did you see the AFC North? Yeah. Okay, you know what? Let's get one. Let's go and get one. And clearly they didn't want Baker and they wanted Matt Ryan.